This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about how to optimize experiential and child-directed learning opportunities. And my guest today is Rekha Magon. Did I say that right? Magon?
Magon, yeah.
Magon, yes. She's the co-founder and head of student experience at Boundless Life, and I'll let her explain a little bit more about that. But welcome to the show, and I'm glad to have you here today to talk about this. We've been kind of focusing this whole month on more child-directed, out of the textbook curriculum type of learning, because I know a lot of parents really get to that planning stage and then maybe they open up their first book and go, well, this wasn't what I expected. Or, they've been doing it for a while and they're like, there's got to be something more to this homeschool education. And so we're kind of diving into those topics this month. And so I'm excited to have you here because Rekha is going to take us a little bit a further step beyond what my past guests have talked about. And we're going to talk about those experiences a little bit more. And so I'm super excited about that. As we were sharing before the show, it's something that that we enjoyed as a family when we homeschooled too, was those experiences. And I, recalling a lot of the things that I remember from our homeschooling years. That's what my kids talk about still now, is a lot of those experiences that they had during our home educating that weren't at the time always seemed like they were educational, but yet they learned so much in them. So welcome. I would just love for you to introduce yourself, share a little bit about you and your family, and then what you do for Boundless Life too.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll introduce myself first. So my name is Rekha. Born and raised in Montreal, Canada. I started off my career as a auditor, actually, at KPMG. I did my CA. I went the more traditional route, and very quickly realized for myself that I just wasn't. Although things were going great, I wasn't passionate about what I was doing and didn't feel really fulfilled. At the end of the day, of a long day. And when I got pregnant with our first child, you start to rethink, like,
right.
How do you want to bring up these kids? Like, what's most important to you? And, I came from an environment that involved a lot of mindfulness, community service, and travel from a very young age, kind of like was brought up in this community that we used to go to a lot of meditation retreats, used to do a lot of community service. And I know how beneficial that was for me as a child growing up. Like, I always felt like I had this sort of flow to my life, like things came very naturally, very easy to me. And I couldn't take credit because I was, it wasn't something that I was born with. I really think it was something that was kind of brought to me through my environment. So when I was pregnant, I knew, like, instinctively that I wanted to give a very similar kind of lifestyle or skill set to my children. So I left the corporate world. I started my first company that was called The Mindful Scholar. So we'd built like a tech platform that brought mindfulness concepts to public schools. This was before Headspace or Calm was a common thing. And so that was going really well. And then when my son, became of school age and I sent him to kindergarten down the street, I think I just really quickly realized at that moment that, okay, the education system in today's world needs, a lot more help than just mindfulness. At least that was my belief, that social and emotional learning, yes, is definitely important, but there were so many things that needed changing, it felt so archaic, like they were doing the exact same things that I was doing 30 years ago. So I pulled him out of school and he actually became my petri dish. So, I bought like,
Those oldest
a-
kids are kind of like that.
yeah, basically. So I bought, every homeschool curriculum out there and tested them on him and tried to find our own flow and our own pattern. And then when COVID hit, like this was pre-COVID. So then when
Okay.
COVID hit, I had so many people reaching out to be like, how do you do this homeschooling? Can you please help us? So I started building some homeschool curriculums. I helped launch a learning center here in Montreal for homeschoolers. And then I started Boundless Life. So my now business partner reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, I have this idea, and I think you are already living this lifestyle. Why don't we do this together?" So Boundless Life, I'm head of education at Boundless Life. I'm a co-founder, and basically what we do is we've developed this complete living abroad experience for families that really has education and community at the core. So
Hmm.
what we provide is a turnkey solution for families to live in any of the destinations that we've already launched in. So we provide a fully furnished apartment that's kind of redesigned for kids, and that's more kid friendly.
It's kind of hard sometimes.
It is, yeah. All those Airbnbs are not always, exactly what you
No.
need for especially when, and our cohorts are 3 months long. So you're not just there
Right.
for like a week or a 10-day stint.
So
You're
putting your
there.
child on a couch for it's
Yeah,
not
it
as
doesn't
easy.
work. You really need like the setup to make it, conducive for staying there for a long period. So we
Right.
provide fully furnished apartments, a co-working space, which we call the hub, which is where a lot of our families who stay with us, many of them work remotely, right, to be able to live this
Right.
lifestyle. So we have our own co-working spaces, and then we build, we call it an education center because it's not a school. We're not building a school in Portugal, Greece, or Italy, and following the local education laws and requirements. We really call it an education center. So in each of our locations, we basically have like a whole learning center for children to attend. Our education, so Boundless Education, revolves around the Finnish education, actually. So as I'm sure being a
Right.
homeschool mom, Finland has always been very progressive in their approach to learning, very child directed, very
Right.
experiential. And we wanted to really kind of model our education on something that's been tried and tested as well, right? It's one thing to
Right.
use your own kids as a petri dish, but then when
Right.
you're building something for the masses, I knew, that they would want something that's more credible and tested.
Right.
So to me, the Finnish model was really something that I was kind of already doing the things that I believed in, right? And had the numbers and the data to back it up. So we
Right.
partnered with a Finnish school development company. So we use as the base of our curriculum, it's called the Nordic Baccalaureate, and very much revolves around experiential learning, child-led personalization, nature immersion. We have a deep emphasis on culture immersion, and then also community, really bringing the community into the classroom directly. So yeah, that's Boundless. We now have 4 locations up and running, so families can stay with us in either Portugal, Greece, Italy, or Bali.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
it just makes a lot of sense because you're pulling in so many different types of families to have one core to kind of center around and to build off of, and that seems to be a worldwide accepted model that
Yeah.
instead of going with more like a classical education where some people are just they're there's some people that are like, yes, that's what I want, and people like me are like, no,
Yeah.
not gonna
Exactly.
happen.
Yeah.
So just strong feelings, and I
Yeah.
don't think anybody really has strong feelings about that, just because it is so child centered, and I know that's what we're gonna be focusing on. But we were even talking about this ahead of the show. Each child is so different that when you focus on the child as the conduit for the education, it can go in some great many different directions and places. But what's nice is you can take some of these things like you were talking about, that nature, that community, that culture, and you can use that to bring that out more instead of trying to, as one of my guests, I think it was on our show last week, she said, I found that I was fighting so hard to try to make my child into someone I wanted them to be versus letting them be who they already were. And I thought that was really profound, that we had to we really have to switch that. And by bringing our children out of the environment that we so nicely set up, like our own homes, we can often find those things about them in a much more free play type of way.
Yeah. Yeah, on that as well, what always boggled my mind, actually, when I had our second child, right, is
Hmm.
like you said, is that, I mean, any parent that has two kids, I find
Yeah.
can appreciate this even more, right? Because in any household, two children are brought up with the same environment, the same conditions, the same everything. Yet they end up being so different, right?
Right.
There's complete, like even within the same house, those
Yeah.
two children, without a fail, are completely different. So I've never understood, why does the traditional education system teach every kid the exact same way? If
Right.
we know that within the same house, two kids are not the same, how can we not be personalizing education? Why are all kids restricted to, whatever year you were born in? You're going to stick with that group of kids for the next 18 years of your life and
Hmm.
be taught in one certain way. Like, it just instinctively didn't sit right with me, right? It didn't make sense. So, I think, yeah, I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more with you on how, we really need to follow the child and direct them in a way that resonates with who they are rather than what we want them to be.
Absolutely. So when you started then working this new model, was your family one of the first to then go? And how did that transition happen for your family? Was it an easy one? Was it hard? What kind of things did you guys learn along the way?
Yeah, yeah. My family, we were definitely part of the group. We have been. We launched 18 months ago, and yeah, my husband and my kids were by my side. We went to Portugal. Literally, like, I went a month, like 2 weeks early, and then they came after, and they were there when we started. And my kids have been. They're now 11 and 9, but they've been through every Boundless cohort, every location, every destination. They're part of it, and honestly, it's been beautiful. Like, to me,
Huh.
it's been nothing but literally extraordinary because, first of all, as a family, we're kind of experiencing this together as a unit.
Right.
Like, whether it's my family or any other family, like, it's really powerful to step out of your comfort zone, right?
Mm.
And to go to this new place, to this new country. And when we go, like I mentioned, we're not there for vacation. We're going
Right.
there to live like a
Hmm.
local, and even when we choose our boundless destinations, we choose them purposely not to be like, um, a tourist haven. Like, we
Yeah.
find these really quaint, hidden gems that not too many people know of. And when you get there as a family, you're really living like a local. You're
Hmm.
going to buy groceries. You're like going to the
Yes.
local doctor. You're finding the local playgrounds, and that experience of, um, it's almost like you're learning and growing together with your children,
Hmm.
right? Because now I'm not in my comfort zone. I'm not in Montreal, where I was born and raised, and I know every street and every, where to get everything. I don't know anything myself as a mom.
Right.
Neither does my husband. Neither do our kids. And
Hmm.
all four of us are now having these shared new experiences together and
Right.
growing and learning along each other. And to me, it's been such a powerful, um, experience for our family. Like,
Hmm.
we've grown so much, but we've grown so much together, if that makes sense, because
Yeah.
we're having this experience together. So it's been incredible. And for me, like, I find it so valuable to have my kids in our education centers, because they're our number one, like, feedback loop. Like, every day I have these two, like, secret agents going in and, like, telling me what's working and telling me what's not working, and what's keeping them engaged, and what was a flop, and
Right.
which field trip was amazing and which one we should never do again. Like, so it's, to me, it's like so valuable to have them there, because they're not going to sugarcoat anything. They're
Oh
going to
yeah,
tell
they
me.
don't for their
They
parents.
don't.
No.
Yeah, they don't. They tell you it like it is, and it's amazing, because for us, it's been a way to just, pivot and improve and, like, change things up so quickly, so fast. So it's been
Right.
really nice, honestly, to have this experience as a family. It's really brought us so much closer than I would have ever imagined.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So what has been one of the most impactful things that your family has learned, or one like experience that is kind of like over the top, a highlight for all of you?
Whew, let's see. I mean, off the top of my head, I would definitely say like discovery, like
Hmm.
if we're going, like I remember once we went on this hike with the Boundless community and we went to, the guy who's taking us on the hike took us down this huge kind of cliff and
Oh, wow.
really, very difficult down the coastlines, up and down, and really like an extensive experience. And then
Mhm.
to kind of reach this summit point where you see like, this just drop gorgeous
Oh,
view of the ocean and, the sun setting. And like, I think those moments of like struggle where like all four of us are like, we're huffing and puffing and it's
yes.
like, we have no idea where we are. We have no idea what we're going to. We don't even know what we're trekking towards.
Right.
And then that kind of um, jaw-dropping moment where like you just experience something that you or see something that you didn't even know existed in the world. You weren't, it's so humbling and
Yeah.
so grounding because it makes you realize how small you are in
Mm,
this world,
yeah.
and to like all four of us of all different ages to kind of feel that same experience at the same time was just so humbling. And it's like, wow, like there's so much more to the
Right.
world that we need that we don't know of. I would
Right.
say as a unit, I would say the experiences like that, which happen honestly every
Mhm.
week when you're at a Boundless location, because you're always going somewhere you've never been before and really kind of just learning. But I would
Right.
also add to that experience, like my son, who's now 11, when we launched, like for the last 18 months, he's a big soccer fan, big soccer
Mm.
player. So he's now played on the local league, like with the local Portuguese kids, the local Greek kids, the local Italian kids. And even as a
Cool.
family to like go watch him practice or his games, where he's like the only kid that speaks English amongst this group of like boys, who only speak the local language.
Right.
And to see like twofold, to see how adaptable he is and how he can just like
Hmm.
jump in and like still create these like deep bonds with his playmates, even though they don't speak the same language. For me, all of us has been like just shocking. It's like, wow,
Huh.
we limit ourselves, I think, sometimes to, you know,
Right.
people that are like us or, people who speak the same language or from the same town or like the same things. But ultimately, and I learned that from kids, is that kids, if they're not programmed, like by the adults, but
Right.
they can see commonality between each
Hmm.
other way more than adults can, like to the beyond
Yeah.
language, and beyond skin color and beyond like
Mhm.
culture. They can really find ways to bond deeply. And for me, I just think it's such a powerful lesson for all of us to learn that, we are actually more alike than we are different. And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes you need to get out of the house and out of your comfort zone to really see that or experience it.
Yeah, yeah. How have you confronted maybe some of those things that were ingrained in you, that you didn't even know were, um, as your family kind of got into these experiences and you realized, oh, I gotta either keep my mouth shut or just
Yeah.
allow this to happen. You have any tips for our parents? Because I know in our community there's a lot of boundaries up
Mm,
for kids that have disabilities, maybe some social anxieties, and we want to kind of protect them,
mm,
yet sometimes we can get in the way of those types of experiences like you're talking about happening because of that protection mode that we go into,
mm,
or those preconceived notions of what is going to happen.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the premise of like almost the whole parenting paradigm, right? Is that balance between, or not the balance, but like catching ourselves when we're in a fear
Yeah.
mindset versus like a trusting or love mindset. I mean, I that creeps up for me all the time, right? Like
Hmm.
whether it's at home or at Boundless or when we're traveling, like so I've really had to, I think the first step is to become aware, right? That, okay, right now
That's true.
I'm
Yeah.
operating from a state of fear, right? Like this,
Hmm.
I'm not trusting in the moment. I'm not like leaving it up to let things flow. I'm operating from fear, and therefore I have my walls up, and and I think the minute we start operating in fear, which is it's almost like all the time, if you
Yeah.
really be conscious of it. Um, but it also, like, I in my own experience, I've seen how that like immediately cuts like the opportunity for flow and the opportunity for the like all these transformative moments that at least I've experienced in my own life
Right.
have been when I'm in a state of like trust, like just trusting the universe, or trusting like that everything is happening the way it's meant to happen, even if it's not how I expect it to happen. And for me, I think it's so powerful to be aware what mindset we're coming from, and to catch ourselves the minute we see ourselves being in a fear state. Like I mean, more relevant to what I'm going through right now, like we're actually home. This is the first cohort that we're not, in a Boundless location, and my kids are not at a Boundless education center. And I not catch myself. I'm constantly now in a state of like, oh my God, like I can't homeschool anymore because I'm actually running this company and I'm busy like all day long. But and now that like I'm in a constant state of fear because I'm like, oh my God, like I don't have my amazing homeschool schedule that I used to have back in the day, and my kids are not at a Boundless education center, and like how are like they're gonna fall behind, or they're gonna like there's all this like this roommate in my mind that's like constantly like talking out of fear. And it's funny, like as you were talking, I just recognized that in myself. I'm like, okay, like they're actually super bright, super like self-directed kids. Like even if they're not at a learning center, or I'm not, hour by hour planning out their day, they're going to be just fine. They're going to like figure this out, and they're going to be just fine. But it's really like a constant moment by moment requirement, to catch yourself. So honestly, thank you, because you just reminded me that it's not a big deal. They're not doing all these crazy, amazing activities at the moment.
Yeah, but that fear does creep in, because I think when we have in our mind, and I think we're just told, that they have to be doing something. They have to be, constantly challenged in order to be learning. But our kids are surrounded by opportunities for learning. And I think we forget that because we're so busy on the programming side versus just the immersion side. And kids, when they are taught how to learn, will learn whether we're teaching them or not. And, so I just want to reassure you put your kids in these places, and they now know how to learn and interact and all these other things. So bringing them back home, they're still going to be learning. They're just going to be reorienting back. That's a whole learning process in itself. When you come back home from a trip or a vacation, how do I take the things that I've learned and resynthesize them back into the learning or the living that I did here? And I found that was the same with our kids. We come back, and I love extended trips. Well, so we've lived in our RV twice, and just kind of reestablishing that whole reestablishment phase was new, because sometimes things that we had at the other house or before our vacation just never came back because they were replaced. Our kids just said, I think I found a better way. So yeah, so just being encouraged in that. And
yeah
absolutely. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about those foundational pillars that you were talking about the nature, the culture, and as well as community. And if you could expound in each of those areas on just what importance each of those can play, and how we as homeschooling parents can accentuate those different areas wherever we're at to make them a more impactful just driver in our child's learning experiences.
Sure. So I'll kind of walk you through what a schedule looks like at a Boundless Education Center. So, we start off with something called connection time. So connection time is a short, like 15-minute period where the educators are really working on character building and mindfulness and group interaction and confidence and kind of these, like, helping instill these more 21st century skills and bringing the group, not only the group together, but each individual child more connected to themselves as well. So to me, like, especially my background and my first company, to me, that's the most important, right? Because social and emotional regulation, really helping kids self-regulate and empowering them to know how, when they're, like, amygdala is activated and when they're in fight or flight mode, and how to take charge and, turning that amygdala off and really getting to that emotional regulation state, I think is so important. So that's a very kind of short period that we've kind of focused on that. And then the kids go into like a mastery time. So that's where we really emphasize the concept of personalization, right? So, we have mixed age groups at Boundless. So there's between 3 years between each class, and the kids are really working at their own pace, right? So, like, they're doing their own math, they're doing their own English based on where they're at individually. And that, I think, is, to me, the future of education. Like like we've already talked about that, but not only kids, like every person is different, right? So they should be moving at their own pace and really being taught individually. So we do use like different tools, online tools, to help assess where a kid is at, meet them there, and then help show progression based on where they're at. And then we go into something called Quest Time. So this is something that I think that's also very applicable to homeschool families, where in Quest Time, what we're doing is having children work on a project-based unit. So every cohort, let's say it's a 3-month cohort, all of our kids at all the destinations are working on the same quest. Okay, so each cohort for us, we follow one UN Sustainable Development Goal. And all locations are working on that SDG at the same time. And the whole purpose there is, okay, it's important to learn your math or your English, right, during mastery time. But to me, what makes learning more engaging to children is when you add purpose to that learning, or you add relevancy, right? So the concept with our quests is that they're now applying whatever they learned in mastery time to a real world problem, right? So what are these SDGs? What is the world in need of? And let us as a group focus on helping work towards actioning, a change in this particular area. So, like, let's say last cohort, they worked on world hunger, right? And so they would, as a group, all locations were working on the concept of world hunger. But even with that, like, you kind of introduce the concept, what is the world struggling with? And then each kids go into different groups and they can work on a specific project that they're passionate about themselves that will help contribute towards world hunger, right? So it's still giving them that freedom, that child-directed learning approach that places the learner at the center, but collectively the whole group is working on a real world problem that can actually have an impact. And I think that is most crucial, right? Because no one, adult or child, wants to work on something that they see no meaning to, right? So if you could add, if you give them meaning and you give them purposefulness and you make them feel like, hey, you're working on something that actually can change the world, their engagement levels skyrocket. Like they care to really devote themselves to this project and be actively engaged with their environment, ask questions, and learn through these experiences. So that's kind of how a morning will kind of fall out every day at a Boundless Education Center. And then the afternoons are divided into, like you said, like nature-based learning. So we will, take the kids out into the forest or to the beach or whatever the local environment is, based on what country we're in. And they'll either learn about, different foliage or different climates or different temperatures, or really kind of become one with the nature around them or the local environment. And then because we're in so many cool countries around the world, we do a big emphasis on the local culture. So they're either learning the local dance or local songs, or the local language is a third language, the history of the place that they're in, maybe doing a Portuguese cooking lesson or a Greek cooking lesson, and really diving into the local culture. And then we follow a 10-day schedule. So every second Friday, the kids are out on a field trip. So based on whatever quest project they're working on or culture time project, they will go outside of the education center and will go experience something, you know, in real life experience based on what they've kind of talked about at the education center. So, and then we also have two other aspects that we do. We do something called Boundless Time, which is like a personal project, you know, that a kid will work on based on anything that they are passionate about themselves. That's also modeled on like the Google's kind of, you know, Google Time, where they ensure that a certain percentage of an employee's day is dedicated towards something they're passionate about. And then the last element we do, which is also super cool, is called Endeavor Time. So because we have these amazing families coming to stay with us from around the world, everyone has something interesting to offer, right? So I've also always questioned, you know, being a homeschool mom, is why do we restrict education or learning to just teachers, right? There's so many other people in the world who can help kids be inspired and learn. And I don't know why it's always just restricted to a teacher. So we really leverage the community of parents that are staying with them and encourage them to take over like an Endeavor Time, which is just an hour a week, and have them share about something that they're passionate about or where they shine in their zone of genius. Because to me, all it takes is like somebody to talk about something super passionately, and then that will ignite, you know, a spark or a flame in a kid. And that's all they need, is they just need that little spark or that exposure to something. So overall, that's kind of the pillar of all the pillars of boundless education and how it seeps into a normal day.
So for parents who maybe have jobs that are location based, or maybe they have a child who has extreme medical needs and, you know, travel is just kind of out of the question, how can they take a lot of the things that you do like at your locations and apply some of those concepts into their home education? Maybe they're sitting here saying, I'd really love to do that. I'd love, you know, to build some of that into either, you know, once a week or maybe change things up completely. What ideas do you have for them to start, you know, looking like where they're at and being able to do those types of things from their space?
Absolutely. I would say like just start by fostering like, you know, a rich and learning environment at home, you know, and like setting up areas like for a kid to be excited to read. Like we have a reading nook at home, like anywhere we go, wherever we are, always make sure that, you know, we set up a cute, cozy reading nook with lights to just like encourage and foster them to grab a book without you needing to tell them again, you know, without saying, okay, now it's reading time, you have to go in the corner. But I think the more thoughtfully and mindfully that you set up different areas within your own home, naturally help kids gravitate towards that. I would also just encourage curiosity generally. Like, you know, we used to have just like a question wall, you know, and like with one column for my son and one column for my daughter with like Post-its, and like anytime like a question came to their head, and maybe I'm busy or my husband's busy, we don't have, you know, always have time
to like
idea. Answer. They would take a Post-it and they would write the question and put it on the question board, you know, and then as a family, when we had time, we would sit down and, you know, collectively go through the questions and try to find answers to them, you know. And I think just little things like that really encourage children to stay curious, and that, hey, like I might not be able to find the answer to this question right now, but my question is important. My curiosity is important. My parents care. And I'm going to make sure like I write that down. And eventually when they have the time, we're going to get back together and we're going to look through it, you know? So I think encouraging curiosity within the home environment is so important, and really allowing children like the freedom to explore their interests, right? Like you mentioned when we first connected as well, like giving them that safe space to say, hey, I'm curious, and like, I'm curious to know what, like if I could take voice lessons, or I want to learn about World War II. Like, how do I, you know, get on Outschool, find some classes, like let them know that whatever they're interested in is not stupid, you know, and like we can, even though it's not conventional, we're going to find a way to like, you know, get you to try that out or explore it and see whether you like it or not. Because I also think, even as an adult, I think it's so important to learn what you don't like. You know, like, because everyone, sometimes we're so focused on figuring out what we do. Like, what am I passionate about? What do I like? Like, I remember spending so many years trying to figure out what is it I'm passionate about. But I didn't realize that all that time where I was figuring out what I'm not passionate about and what I don't like is just as valuable, because then it makes me 10 times more confident to, go full force ahead with the things that do light me up or do spark me up. So I think that
Absolutely.
as well is just so important, to just let your kids experiment, let them try out things,
Mhm.
give them the freedom so that they're not always being micromanaged,
Yeah.
and you're more of a facilitator or a guide rather than this is your schedule, do this, and again, like I think I'm talking to myself here as well, reminding myself, not to get stuck in those fear-based concepts. But yeah, I
Right.
think really catching yourself and just reminding yourself that, you know, and kids are so smart. Like I can tell my daughter's never even been to school, like not once. And she's
Mhm.
honestly already correcting my English, correcting my writing. Like she's like, Mama, like that's not how you say. I'm like, how do you know this? Like,
Right.
I didn't teach you this. You haven't gone to school. Like how, like, and for me, it's been such a powerful lesson because it's like kids are innately knowledgeable. Like you just have to trust again, it all comes down to
Mhm.
trust. You have to trust the process. So I
Yeah.
don't think parents have to, like, yeah, many families can't travel the world and that's totally okay, but you can recreate a similar concept within your own home. And even when we were homeschooling, it's funny, like everyone was like, "Oh my God, you're a homeschooler." I'm like, "Actually, no, I'm a van schooler," because I felt like I was actually just like driving my kids to like different experiences, like whether it was
Right.
forest school or skating lessons or jujitsu or like, play dates or I don't know, 3D printer. Like I was always taking them somewhere to
Right.
like have this experience. So I think even within the walls of your own community and your local environment, like
Right.
you can give your children those experiential learning experiences within your own backyard. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't restrict parents either to feeling like, oh, I can't do this if I'm home. You can. You just have to like create it. It takes time. It's not easy. I also have a
Right.
huge lot of empathy for like how much effort and timing it takes, but the rewards are, I think, like just exponentially higher. So I would just encourage everyone that even though it takes a lot of planning and a lot of effort, like stick with it because I mean, you have kids that are older and already kind of gone through it all, but I see it just in my little kids, how much
Right.
they've grown and expanded and
Mhm.
yeah, not a regret in my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's better that they fail at home, in trying out those things and saying, "Ooh, I don't like that." And I always, I don't commit myself or my children to anything too long when they don't
Mm,
know whether they like it or not. I found that out very early on because, telling them, "Well, we paid for the whole, the whole semester. You got to go."
right.
That instead of saying, "Let's try a class," you know,
Mm,
and see, or if they don't let you try a class, at least let's sit and watch a class and ask an instructor if you can do that. So they know what they're getting into ahead of
mm,
time and say, yes, no, I think I can commit to that. Um, because I found that I'd rather they fail, find out those things at home, like you were talking about, then, they graduate and now I don't know what I like to do, what I don't like to do. People have been telling me all my life what I have to do, and now
mm,
I'm not told by anybody what I need to do, and that's a bad place to leave anybody.
100%, 100%. Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, so just giving them those choices, those experiences, it's good. Um, but when it comes to community, a lot of the kids in our community have a lot of social anxieties. And Deb just posted a question, and we can kind of skirt on this. I know it may not be your realm of expertise, but she has she's asking what's the best way to help her move from fear to trusting. I'm trying to get my grandson to participate in cognitive delay community activity. Right now, he wants me to stay with him instead of experiencing the group and growing in independence. And maybe you've seen this with other families, like in your cohorts, where they have a child that just doesn't want to be left.
Mm.
Do you have any advice on just
Yeah.
how to maybe go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do like in a boundless location, especially with the younger ones, or I think if anyone who has like fear of leaving,
Hmm.
we do like a transitional integration, right? So let's say we have full day schedules, but the exploration kids for the first 3 days of the cohort, they're not staying all day. They're only staying for the first 3 hours, and then the parents come pick them up early. Or, we do during those kind of first 3-4 days, we give the flexibility of parents staying or being picked up, at earlier times so that they're transitioning into this new experience, more softly than very kind of an abrupt leaving them.
Right.
I think I would do a similar approach, as the first, if he's, reluctant to attend with him for the first few sessions. I've done that many times with my own kids even, my son is more a go-getter and doesn't need us. But like my daughter's, she's the opposite. Like she's super smart and intelligent, but when it comes to social settings, like she wants me there, like she's scared to be left alone. So I foster that. It's like, okay, that's fair, right? Like just how we follow our own children's direction. So
Right.
I will stay with her for the first, 1, 2, or 3 sessions, but I'll also, like, I'm big on awareness, right? And talking the child through the experience. So,
Yes.
okay, like, how are you feeling? What are you nervous about? Like, how did you feel today with me there? Now imagine next week I wasn't there or I left. Like, that I'm going to come back, right? Like I will be back within the hour to pick you up, and kind of just talking it through, I find, is so important, because it's all, at least I don't know what the way my generation was raised, or at least I was, like sometimes just like, no, this is what you do and that's it. Like I'm leaving and I'll be back in an hour and that's it. And kids just need communication, right? They just need to hear. It's like, you name it to tame it, right? Like that's a big philosophy when it comes to like brain science, is that like kids are good. We all have emotions, whether we want to accept it or not. Like I'm a grown woman. I still feel fear. I still feel anger. I still feel frustration. And, even for myself, like I need to name what I'm feeling. I need to be aware of it. I need to name it. And then once you name it, it's like magically it gets tamed. And that's why they say name it to tame it. And I really experienced that, at least with my own kids, that if I can help them put words to what they're feeling, or help them learn that I need to put words to what I'm feeling, and now they can articulate what they feel. And just by articulating, often, not always, every child is different, but I think often that really helps them process the emotion, and they're more able to get over it quicker.
Right. And a lot of times they don't even realize what the fear is until they name it. And then they're like, oh, that's what I'm kind of going through. And then you can help, as the parent, facilitate, well, is that fear really genuine? Is that something that really would happen there? And if that did happen, what can you do within that situation, and really find those solutions before that even happens? So then they've got a plan, in place too. And I know, Deb, your grandson, I think, is a little bit older. She's asked questions before on the show. So being in those teen years, he can talk through a lot of these things, and really maybe it's just a matter of sitting down and saying, well, what is generating this anxiety? What is generating this fear? Why is my presence helping you? And what would happen if I left? Yeah, we do have to talk through it and be reassured that it's going to be okay. Because there's going to be times, and I know, there's times where too, you're going to have to say, I've got to be somewhere right now. And I just need to be gone. And it's okay. And let's just, like that you were talking about too, was, that slow progression out of that circumstance. And
I would also add, like, even if he's older, in a high school or teenager years, I think even then, like sometimes they need like the very basic conversations. Like I said, like name it to tame it is a term we use for young kids, but it's powerful for me. It's powerful for a teenager. Like I think sometimes it's just going back to the basics, and also acknowledging, like, I don't want to make a generalization, but I do, at least in my own home, I can say that, girls have a much easier time expressing how they feel, whereas sometimes boys need more pushing. Like I know my son, like he won't talk about how he feels, like, whereas I have to really, like, even now, like like I can imagine if you're a teenage kid, like it takes even more effort, and I think just being aware of that, and going down to the basics, and really, like, it's funny, like my kids used to watch Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood when they were really small, or even remember them watching like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And, like I still use some of those terms on them now, even though my son's 11 or, my daughter's 9. It's like, hey, I remember they had this song that was like, grown-ups come back, and it's like, it's such a simple song, but it's like, hey, like, don't worry, I'm a grown up and I will come back. Like, I'm dropping you off, but I know you might have a fear that I might never come back or something might happen, but I will come back. You have to remember that I will come back. So I think just sticking to the basics, even though sometimes it feels stupid when you're talking to a grown man or a teenager, but to really stick to the basics helps.
Yeah, she said he's 16. So yeah. And I agree. The base level as those fears, that anxiety rises and our like thinking goes out the window. It's just
Totally.
like all common sense. Just no,
Gone.
not there. Yes. So yeah, it just really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So one last thing I want to touch on is this multi-age learning. Since I know you do that at your centers, and so many homeschool families teach such a range of kids, and that's a question that we get all the time is, how do I teach all these different people, at different levels and keep my sanity?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I personally think multi-age is so much more beneficial than the traditional system. I really do. Like, I see it in action now at all of our locations and all of our classes. Like, I think it really, first off, it eliminates competitiveness, because I think when you're bulked into a group of kids that are the exact same age as you automatically assume, or it's inherently implied that we're all have to be at the exact same level. Like, I should be performing exactly how everyone else in this room is performing, because we're all born the same year and we should all be the exact same, right? And again, we know that is far from reality, right? Nobody is the exact same. So the minute you now add in kids of a different age into that dynamic, it's like that competition angle is eliminated out of the room, because all of a sudden, like, oh, well, that kid's older than me, 2 years older than me. That kid is 1 year younger than me. It's like, and we're all at these kind of different phases. And that's cool, because now I'm not like expected to perform a certain way based on everyone I'm surrounded by. So I think it's like it takes away from that pressure cooker kind of like energy that could happen in a classroom. And I think it's also really powerful, because now you have this sense of like big brother, younger brother, where like the older ones end up being these mentors to the younger ones, and they get to help the younger ones with questions. And they're all of a sudden now developing these leadership skills and this like confidence, because now not only do they understand, they have to learn their topic, but they know that like there's going to be a period where someone's going to ask them how to do this. And they have to, and when you have to re-explain something to somebody else, that sits in your brain in a completely different way. You're now you become the teacher of that subject. And that's when you've really mastered a concept, So I think the benefits highly outweigh the negatives. It is tricky, obviously, for the facilitator or the guide to be able to meet like each kid where they're at. And I think now with technology, though, like there's so many amazing tools that allow kids to work at their own pace and at their own level. And therefore the facilitator is really just facilitating each kid where they're at. So I personally think multi-age is incredible. I also love the dynamic of community that it brings to an organization. Like, at least at our Boundless locations, like our micro schools or learning centers are so small, like they never have more than 60 kids. And they range from, ages 1 to 12. And it's incredible to see how that dynamic of kids, how quickly they form bonds, and how quickly kids of different ages form bonds. So like, like my son, I remember like in our last cohort in Portugal, like his best friend was a 2-year-old, and he like proudly was like, this little guy is my BFF. And he had like other boys his age who they totally got along with, but like the bond that he formed with this 2-year-old was so precious and so beautiful. And it's like that in all ages and all, like there's really this beautiful dynamic of community and almost becoming like this big family within the learning environment that I think exponentially helps a child grow, because you're not you've taken away that competitive angle of like having to outperform my peers. And now you're like adding in this element of family and like co-learning and helping each other out and really stepping up to being the older one or the younger one and kind of falling into these varying different roles. I think it grows an individual so much.
Yeah. And I think it's good for you to emphasize too, that the older children are not losing out because the younger children are learning maybe at a slower pace. They have to change that mode to that more teaching, that more helping and the facilitating. And it's accentuating their learning, not taking it back. And I know a lot of our families, especially that have kids who have learning challenges or maybe more severe disabilities, they kind of in the back of their heads, they're like, well, but isn't my child that has a disability slowing the rest of my kids down or taking away experiences? And I think you have to change it. Like Rekha was just talking about, is just that there's learning in that experience. And
Absolutely.
And we can't just say it's not a good learning environment just because it's not maybe in our mind how we picture the best learning environment for a child. It's our ideal. We have to take that ideal out of there.
I agree fully. Yeah, it like you don't even realize what they end up learning, but they're learning so much more. They're growing as individuals. They're learning how to deal with tricky situations, how to be adaptable, how to be agile. And to me, those are the things that are most important, right? Is to deal with like a challenging situation and a situation that is not going as planned. To me, that is really what's going to build the future leaders of the world, right? Because they're now adaptable and they're able to deal with these different situations and, know how to go with the flow or step up when needed or help in a different way. And I think that's even more beneficial personally than making sure you finished, that particular lesson plan or whatever.
Yeah, that's just good words to for everyone in our audience to hear, because there are so many days that things just don't go as planned.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
So can you share one last just really fun story of your family and your travels that that kind of just sticks out?
Yeah. I can think of like when we were in Greece around this time last year, we lived at our Greece location for 3 months. And, Greece was beautiful. We were on this like tiny island called Syros, and very authentic families, like, old grandmas, old grandpas all over the place, like really authentic Greek feel. And my son, he found there's this little like street cart venue that sold like souvlaki's, and we're vegetarian. And this lady, her Greek grandmother found a way to make like veggie meat, like from scratch. And it was like the tastiest souvlaki's we've ever had. So my son literally like every day before soccer, he would go and like get his souvlaki and like was so in love with the culinary experience of Greece. And so around October came around and it was Halloween time. I was really busy, like whatever with work and stuff. And I didn't realize that like, everyone in our community was planning to dress up for Halloween. I thought we're in Greece. No one celebrates Halloween here. I don't need to worry about finding my kids' Halloween costumes. And here comes like Halloween and it's like the day of, and I didn't even realize like my whole team was making this huge like celebration at the hub, right, for Halloween. And I'm the only person who has like no costumes or anything planned for my kids. So it was so funny. So I ran to like the dollar store with my kids and we're like and my son was determined. He's like, I want to be a souvlaki for Halloween. Like, I don't, like he was just dead serious on being a souvlaki because he was so in love with the Greek culture and this Greek food that he would eat every single day. So honestly, it was the funniest and most like random experience ever. Within like 20 minutes, we found like we used, like a green mop for like lettuce, and we used like a table mat for like tomato pieces and cut in half. And we dressed him up as this Greek souvlaki. And here he was like walking around this Greek island with all his buddies, like dressed up as a Greek souvlaki, carrying like a Greek flag. And it's just, it was like to me, and like I was like trying to convince him out of it because I'm like, this sounds so confusing. How am I going to do this in
Right.
20
Yeah.
minutes? But like, I think to me that was so cool looking back. Now I look at the pictures and like we laugh our heads off, but like that to me is like culture immersion, right? Where a
Right.
kid from like Canada,
Mm.
is so like taken aback by this Greek culture and the people who
Right.
are making the food
Mm.
and what it tastes like and how amazing it tastes that he wants to literally like, before this, it was you want to dress up as Messi or as like a superhero or whatever. Like these people that are so far removed for him, but
Right.
living in this country now for it was
Mm.
only a month and a half at that point,
Oh,
but his
wow.
appreciation for the local culture and the local food was so
Right.
deep within him that like forget the superheroes, forget Lionel Messi. I want to be a Greek Slovaki, and I think to
Yeah.
me that's culture immersion at its best.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, that's a great
That's,
story.
yeah,
Yes.
thank
And one of
you.
those that your family will laugh at for years and years and years to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. So before we go, I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about your website, Boundless Life, and what you offer to homeschool families, and so that our families that might be interested in connecting with you can find out more.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys are interested, you can visit our website, which is www.boundless.life. All the information for our different locations and our cohorts and the prices are on the website. You can also follow us on our social media channels. We're on all of them: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I think we're also on TikTok now. Great place to connect with us, and just we also regularly like share tips and resources and are really engaging with our community. So feel free to reach out in any one of those platforms, and yeah, you'll get to learn more about us.
Thanks so much, Rekha. Yeah, I'm excited for where your communities are taking off. It definitely is a now that people homeschooling has become much more mainstream and people are trying to find how do I do this and how do I do this well, that world schooling that your site talks a little bit about. I think I'm hearing more and more about that, and that immersion, but how do we do that? And you're kind of giving people that opportunity to maybe try it out and have those experiences in an environment that takes a lot of the guesswork out for them. And so I'm excited to see where that goes. And just as you continue to build this, that's very exciting. And so is your family off again? Are you home for so long, or where are you off to next?
Yeah, next we'll be off to our Bali location. So
Oh,
in
that's right.
December, yeah, we're going to head out to Bali, which is exciting. So I love Southeast Asia. So very excited we spent our time in Europe, which I also now absolutely love, but excited to take the family to a whole new continent. And who knows
Yeah.
what my son will dress up as next year,
Well, yeah.
Maybe a Balinese curry or something. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I have boys like that too. If all food leads to good
Yeah,
things, for them. So
exactly.
it's the problem is when holidays come along, it's like, can you cook us all of our favorite stuff like all at once? I'm like, man, that's a lot.
So
but
funny.
but yes. Well, thank you for sharing your experiences with us, your family, and I'm just excited to hear where your homeschooling adventure goes. Got
Thanks.
a lot of years ahead, which is exciting. I know it's daunting, but you're going to do amazing. And
Thanks.
just keep up the good work in both home and what you're doing for other homeschool families.
Thanks, Peggy. I enjoyed the conversation as well. It was really nice.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to continue this kind of same type of theme. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to put your child in charge of learning. And Leroy, and I'm forgetting his last name. He's been on our show before, but his connection was really bad last time, and I said you've got to have a better connection because the information that he has is just so amazing. And so you're definitely going to want to join us for that. He's been in education for a long time, and he actually trains educators on how to do differentiated education. So a lot of what Rekha was talking about, maybe some of the tools and those types of things, is what he is just gifted in. So you'll want to join us for that conversation. But definitely check out Rekha's website at boundless.life and check out our website. It's pethomeschool.com for all of your needs for homeschooling, special education. Search our libraries. Our YouTube channel has over 1,000 videos, or just search our website and all the blogs and information we have there. So thanks for being part of our community. And we will see you same time, same place here next week. And until then, God bless everybody. We'll see you then. Bye.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.